Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.8 support tier list. So if you'd like to access this Google Doc we're going to be going over, just look in the description. You can find it there, and you can also find timestamps. You can jump around to your favorite parts. I do have a patch notes video that I still have to put the timestamps in there, but that will be available once this gets released, so I'll have a link here for you in the Google Doc, and then I'm probably going to do the best champions for each role after that. But once I get those finished, then I'll add this retroactively into the link as well if you're watching it in the future. So first up, we're going to talk about some of the new considerations. It's just going to be continuing trends that started last patch that a lot of people haven't caught on to as much yet. So that's mostly just the rise of tank supports and the increasing power of AP supports, and then we'll go into the tier list itself. So yeah, let's go ahead and get in here. So tank supports get nerfed again. I'll hit the highlights really quick of the patch notes. A lot of this is not going to hit support. So watch the patch notes video for the full rundown. So I'm not going to go super in depth into this, but basically LeBlanc's going to be super strong. Ahri's still going to be whatever, not that great. Irelia's still going to be strong. Those are big nerfs to her ult, but people are figuring out how to play her and itemize her, so she's still going to be a menace top lane, but she's just in the same ballpark as like Camille, Fiora, that type of stuff, so it shouldn't shake up the meta too much. Same thing with LeBlanc. It's not going to shake the meta too much. Like, people will play more LeBlanc, but you know, Fizz has already been really popular for a while and strong, and he's about the same thing, so as far as like considering which supports are going to be strong, it's going to be similar. Assassins are going to continue to trend upward, and tanks are going to trend downward. Zyra, meaningful nerf. He's still going to be pretty bad in solo queue most of the time. Braum, that's fairly significant. He got nerfed pretty heavily there. We'll talk about that when we talk about Braum here in a little bit. Galio nerf, you don't see him in solo queue that much. A lot of this stuff was for pro play on this patch. So there weren't a ton of effects for solo queue. Janna potentially got a really big nerf. We'll talk about that. This is something that wasn't shown in the patch notes that I discovered when I was doing the patch notes video. So I'll just tease that. Janna's near the top of the list for champions on the tier list. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Kai'Sa, irrelevant nerfs, doesn't matter. Lissandra, irrelevant buffs. Nautilus, okay buffs, not going to change that much. Rise, good nerf for pro play, not going to matter for solo queue. He's still bad. Sion nerf, he was already trending downward because of the tank nerfs, so we'll talk about him later, but I don't think that's going to shake up his position too much. Tom got a lot worse. I mean, he was already in a bad spot for solo queue. Talia, minor nerf, doesn't matter. Varus, nerf, but not. He got some compensatory buffs. He's still kind of middling for solo queue right now. He's not amazing, so he's kind of got his same spot. Vi, buffs, doesn't matter really that much for solo queue. She's a little bit better, but it's not going to shake up the meta that much. Xayah, good nerf. She was already strong, so there's going to be a little bit less Xayah, so that's going to pull down Rakan a little bit, but he's still decent if you need an engaged champ. He's one of the better ones, so that's okay. She was one of the better ones, so that'll pull her down a little bit, but she's still strong. Archangel's not going to matter. Most people who get the tier are going to get Rod of the Ages anyways, and once you complete Seraph's Embrace, it's the same thing. So if you go, you know, if you're playing Cassiopeia or something, and you go, you know, tier into Rod of the Ages and then complete your Archangels, you'll probably have it almost stacked up by then anyway, so that's not going to matter. Lethal Tempo, good buff, but nobody uses this. It's still going to be really bad. You might see it on, like, Kog'Maw maybe a little bit more, maybe Twitch or something, but I think a lot of people are still going to opt for Fleet Footwork or Press the Attack. And Sweeping Lens buff is interesting. It's good for champions that want bush control early, bot lane, especially people who can trigger their Frostfang really quickly, so someone like a Zyra is going to like this, so she can switch into sweeping faster and not have to wait until level 9, but, you know, a lot of champions, this is not going to matter. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the patch notes. So there's more, like, in-depth stuff, so watch the patch notes. That was just the quick TLDR, but as far as, like, we're concerned right here, you know, thinking about the support tier list, there's not going to be a ton of changes to it. So tank supports are still going to be borderline unplayable. I know I've had people that have debated me since I started talking about the downfall of tank supports in solo queue at platinum and lower. Now they're still like all right, you know, in challenger and professional level play. The reason for that is it's much higher organized play. The engages are much more meaningful. there are single targets that are worth peeling and protecting a lot more in high level play. The AD carries aren't going to be out of position as much, so your peeling is going to matter more. And games are shorter, so people aren't going to have as many items, and scaling's not going to come into play as much. But if you have more of a Clown Fiesta style, where people are just running around all the time, it's difficult to position properly to peel people when everyone's just, you know, chasing and starting fights without proper vision and all of that kind of stuff, then the enchanters are just going to be better at that style of play than most of the tanks. Not all of them, but most of them. Especially the peeler tanks like Braum and Tom. They really want organized team fights. So this is just a brief little list here of all the nerfs they've made to tanks since 8.2. They nerfed Aftershock, Guardian, Spellbook, and the Inspiration Tree in general in 8.3. Resolve HP nerf in 8.4. Aftershock nerfed again in 8.5. Locket received a lot of nerfs last patch. Ninja Tabi got nerfed. Resolve HP got nerfed again. And Relic Shield has received a total of 5 nerfs since the beginning of the season. So they are really, really trying to get tanks out of the support role as much as possible to moderate them for professional play. Okay. So, you know, people feel differently about this. A lot of people hate it. Some people are okay with it. You know, as I explained, it's really hard to balance tanks for the support role in solo queue because they're often much better in pro play because the reasons I described: communication, tighter organization, less scaling involved, and then also other roles poach their items a lot. So they didn't nerf Locket because it's OP on tanks. They nerfed Locket because it was overpowered on like Sejuani and Zac. The same reason that they nerfed Knight's Vow earlier this season or in the preseason. The same reason they nerfed Relic Shield a lot earlier and took away the Bandit from it. That was because of Gangplank in the top lane using it, and a couple of other abusers. So it's anytime supports get cool tank items, they get poached by other champions because they're cheaper and efficient. So if you can buy a quality tank item for like 2,200 gold, why would you spend 2,900 gold for it if you're in the jungle? Especially if you're a professional player who's not going to get that much gold anyways because people aren't going to die as much. So that's why. Is because support items are designed and balanced around the fact that supports aren't going to have as much gold as other roles. So to compensate for that, to make sure they're relevant and reasonably powerful, then their items are cheaper. And so when you have other roles that actually get a lot of gold, then they hit their power spikes faster if they can buy and use support items. This is why Ivern was nerfed into the dirt, because he used enchanter items, and he was one of the only people in other roles that used enchanter items. So, you know, you have like Mid Karma, who's actually becoming kind of respectable lately. She had been pretty bad for a while, but they've nerfed a lot of the other top champions enough that she's starting to come back a little bit. And she's pretty decent against assassins because she has the big shield and because her mantra W heals her for a ton. So she's actually kind of coming into respectability in the mid lane now a little bit, because it's becoming a lot less about high sustained damage from things like Ryze, Cassiopeia, Azir, the super high scaling sustained damage champs, towards more of these assassin type of champs that we mentioned before. And Karma, and some of the tanks like Galio, who are historically pretty good into assassins, are getting nerfed. And so that's opening up a space for Karma to come in as kind of a potential anti-assassin champ in the mid lane. And they've nerfed the wave clear on a lot of other champions too. I mean, we'll talk about, when I do the mid lane, you know, top 5 mid laners, I'll talk about that. I'm not sure if she'll be top 5, but I'll definitely make her an honorable mention, because they've nerfed the wave clear on a lot of champs too, and she has really, really good wave clear. So anyways, all of this means that tanks are still very difficult to balance because other roles poach their items, and professional players just use tanks in their environment a lot better than people that are platinum minus, which is what this tier list is designed for. So I don't, this is going to be a continuing design problem until they create a stat called something like support power, where you have to have a tier 3 gold item in order to unlock certain aspects of items. Then that will gate the items to make sure they're for support only, and that other people won't poach them. They're going to have to do this. And, you know, not only for tank supports, I mean, they could do something that's just called like tank power, which is kind of like plus healing and shielding right now for support. So it's worked out really well for enchanters when they introduced plus healing and shielding as a stat back near the end of season 6, because other roles don't want that for the most part. You know, there's Camille top lane's not going to get plus healing and shielding. There are some exceptions, like maybe Karma mid could use some plus healing and shielding, Ivern that I mentioned before, but most champions, there's not widespread usage of plus healing and shielding as a stat. So effectively, that is something like support power, where it's, you know, power specifically for support that's not unlocked in other roles very easily, at least. Whereas, you know, something like armor, something like HP, something like, you know, Locket shield, all of these things can potentially be really good in other lanes. So if you just say, okay, well, Locket shield, you can't use Locket's shield unless you have a tier 3 gold item, or you can't use like Zeke's active unless you have the tier 3 gold item, or you can't use Knight's Vows active unless you have the tier 3 gold item. And in exchange for that, they can make the item stronger because they don't have to balance Knight's Vow around the jungler. They don't have to balance Zeke's around, you know, or Banner of Command around a top lane tank. Now, Banner, it's arguable whether or not that should be a support item. I think it should be balanced as a support item because it's 2,200 gold. And that's just too efficient to let other people have. So yeah, that would hurt people like Sion and Singed and these push champions top lane. But I think that's the only way you're going to be able to make tank supports viable again. Peeler tank supports that don't have really strong engage, viable again, is just to gate their cool stuff behind behind a tier 3 gold item. And I think they could also lower the cost on and make Frozen Heart more viable again for tank supports. So they should increase the cripple effect to 20% like it used to be. They should knock off, you know, some amount of armor and mana and make it a 2,200 gold item. And just make that active once again, or make the passive, the crippling ability, a support power ability. So they would have to have a tier 3 gold item to activate it. That's the only way they're going to have free design space to make cool stuff for champions like Tahm Kench and Braum, who aren't going to get a ton of gold, and keep it away from junglers and top laners. So we'll see if Riot figures that out at some point down the line. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have problems with balancing tank supports. So we'll see. Now, Alistar, Thresh, and Blitz are still going to be pretty good because they have really strong engage, and they're good against squishy champions like enchanters. Taric is still okay into AD assassins because he's very difficult to kill himself, and that extra armor and shield that he gives off helps prevent burst from assassins, because he can shield and he can heal if he has to. Of course, he has his ult, but usually that's a bit slow for assassins. But giving away that extra armor does help against champions like Zed, Talon, things like that. Although Fizz and LeBlanc and the AP supports, or the AP assassins, are going to be a lot stronger these days, in part because Locket was nerfed so much. But anyways, that's a continuing trend. It's still going to be a problem until they change the way, until they add in something like support power for tanks. Okay, so AP supports are going to start coming back. Some people have started playing this now. This is going to happen at gold and lower, maybe a little bit in platinum. People haven't caught on to this too much. I've been seeing a bit more Zyra in games, but she's going to get a lot stronger. She is stronger right now because Locket is one of the main reasons that pushed her kind of to the fringe of the meta for higher than gold for like Plat Plus. But now that Locket is extremely weak, enchanters are still going to have redemption, but they're not going to be able to go redemption plus Locket. So her damage is going to be a lot more relevant for more of the game. They've also nerfed the resolve tree, so that means there's going to be squishier enchanters. Enchanters have to pay a much higher opportunity cost in order to get Chrysalis plus bone plating in the resolve tree, because now they're not going to get that 65 starting HP. They're going to start at, it's like 5 or 10 HP that scales up, which is going to make them a lot more vulnerable in the laning phase. So that is still an option. Chrysalis plus bone plating is still good. That's still what enchanters should get versus someone like Zyra, but you're just going to, they had to pay a little bit of HP for that early on. That's going to make them vulnerable, especially around like level 3 when you get your E-plant with Zyra and you can start trying to fish for all ends. Okay. The Resolve plus Inspiration nerfs over time have made things like Eyeball Collection and Ingenious Hunter a more viable build. You can still go something like Inspiration on Zyra, so you can still get something like Boots plus Cosmic Insight. The problem with that is with AP supports, Boots are specifically a really powerful power spike. Because they get Sorcerer Boots, which gives them an extra 18 penetration, which is a really big deal. So delaying your boots until, you know, around 9 minutes and 30 seconds in the game is not always optimal for Zyra, even though you would get extra value out of it. You know, you get an extra like 375 gold value out of free boots plus the plus 10 movement speed. You're delaying your power spike. Like, her big power spike is getting those Sorcerer Boots and then typically getting something like Haunting Guise a lot of times, or the 1500 gold 15 pin item. So, you know, boots aren't always a great option. Cosmic Insight's okay, but the 5% cooldown is not going to be as game-breaking and useful as it is on some other champions, because a lot of times you're waiting on your seeds anyways to cast your stuff. It does lower the seed cooldown. So, I mean, 5% CDR is good. She just doesn't make as much use of that as some other champs. Because she primarily just revolves around that one cooldown. She doesn't, like, the cooldown on her other abilities don't matter as much as they do on a champion who might use multiple abilities like Janna, who's going to be using her W and her E, her shield, or like Nami or Lulu or things like that. So Inspiration's still okay, but you can't make good use of the boots, and Cosmic's not as great on her, and she doesn't need mana as much on someone like Zyra, so the mana off of Biscuits is okay, but you don't need it as much either. So that opens up a space to get something like, you know, going from Comet down to Scorch, and then getting something like Eyeball Collection, Ingenious Hunter. Ingenious Hunter does help you out with Zyra. I'll talk about her build that I like down here in just a second. So just preview that. We'll get to that when we talk about Zyra here in just a second. But I think Ingenious is definitely a bit more viable now than it has been in the past. Yeah, and we'll talk about the Twin Shadow Shrelia build here in just a second when we get to Zyra. Just so that we keep it all organized. So if someone skips down to the Zyra section, you know, they'll have all the relevant conversation about Zyra. Okay, so Jhin and Caitlyn, still very powerful early on. Caitlyn especially is super popular right now, even though she doesn't have the highest win rate. You know, this is for the last 7 days. She's, you know, I'd say, isn't she the most popular? She's not the most popular as, well, I picked win rate there. Where's pick rate? But she's up there, right? It feels like Caitlyn's in every game. People are still playing Ezreal for some reason. People playing Caitlyn. Even though she doesn't have a high win rate, people still like to play her. And so these two, Jhin and Caitlyn, push really hard early game. And so having champions that can push, that can pressure, that can kill some people early on, does make AP supports a little bit better. Like Ezreal, you don't want to play AP supports with Ezreal because he's not going to be able to follow up with much damage. You don't really want to play anything with Ezreal. If we're being honest, but anyways, the early game emphasis does help AP supports a lot. And then the sweeper buff is specifically good for Zyra because she has great vision control with her plants anyways, and so giving up those wards matter less to her. The early game trinket wards matter less to her than they do matter for you know, other champions like Janna, Nami, things like that, because Zyra can use her plants to clear out enemy pinks and control vision a lot better than other champs can. And she benefits very heavily from having bush control because she can kill people out of bushes easily. And if you want to go for something like Eyeball Collection early on, then that will help you start getting stacks for that earlier in the game. So all of this is good news for Zyra. And she does often trigger her trigger the wards off of Frostfang because her plants apply stacks of the gold generation, and they're risk-free. Basically, you can just drop a Q plant on somebody anytime you have a W active. So it's basically risk-free stacking, pretty heavily stacking, because the plants can hit multiple times. Pretty heavily stacking of the gold generation from Frostfang. So all of this is good for Zyra. Okay, so remember the new tier list format. The top 5 champions, no matter what, are going to be tier 1. The next 10 are going to be tier 2, and the next 10 are tier 3. I changed this to make it really clear, like, where certain cutoff points are. So sometimes in the past, I would have had 3 people in Tier 1, and then, you know, I maybe have, like, you know, 10 people in Tier 2. So I'm just trying to make it consistent. What does Tier 1 actually mean? What does Tier 2 actually mean? And so not every champion in Tier 1 or Tier 2 is going to be equal to every other champion in Tier 1 or Tier 2. That's just for greater clarity about sort of the positionality of these champions. So overall, I'm going to try to cover the top 25 here, and I cover the top 5 for more time, and then we start speeding up a little bit once we get to the Tier 2, and certainly once we get to the Tier 3. And remember that this is optimized for Plat Minus and solo queue, so it's going to be different if it's professional play, if it's challenger level play. It's going to be a little bit different. Some things will be similar, but overall, this is for the vast majority, you know, the top, or the 97%, the bottom 97% of players who play solo queue, which is, you know, Plat Minus. So this isn't optimized for the top 3% of players. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So Nami's still going to be top of the roost. Now, there's several reasons for Nami being up here. Now, I did have Janna here last patch, I think. You could still put Janna up here. Janna did get a nerf, and a pretty significant nerf, which we'll talk about here in a second. Much worse than the patch notes imply. But Nami in general is going to be strong. And the reason for this is she's one of the strongest lane-dominant champions early on because her heal is her harass. And it's pretty good cost efficiency if you're using it correctly. So you can, for 70 cost, you can W somebody and you're going to do 70 damage plus 65 heal. So she can do it by herself. You can go up, auto attack, W, auto attack. You'll trade a lot of damage onto them and you'll heal yourself at the same time on one cooldown. So that is different from any other support. If you think about Sona, for example, and Nami gets compared with Sona a lot, Sona has to Q and then she has to W if she wants to heal herself. So her W doesn't do any damage and her Q doesn't do any healing. It's not like this hybrid of Nami here. You think about Janna, her damage ability is her W in lane. If she wants to shield to protect herself, she has to use E. If you think about Lulu, if she wants to do her full combo, she has to E plus Q, which leaves no protection for herself. So that's what makes Nami particularly oppressive in the early game, is she has a heal, and her heal is built into her damage trading pattern. So that makes her just very oppressive, and there's no skill shots involved. You can't miss it. You just walk up, W them. If you can, get an auto attack in there as well. Boom, there's a trade. Wait 10 seconds, rinse and repeat. So I think that makes her really, really strong early on. She's also versatile in that if you have a Turkey ADC and you're getting completely pushed in and it's just too dangerous to try to pressure anymore, you can use your heal defensively. Now, it's not good to do that just to heal your ally. It's not cost efficient, you know, for 100 mana you're getting 125 heal. But that's something that you can do in a pinch if it's a really bad situation. You can't retroactively heal people with like Lulu or Janna or Karma. If your AD carry takes a really bad trade, they're just going to get pushed out of lane. But with Nami, you can sacrifice some of your mana in order to heal people up to full, or at least to safe ranges if you have to. So it's not amazing for that use, but it is an option. It's not available to other enchanters. 725 range is pretty legit too. You got to keep in mind that in a team fight, you can also bounce this. So if you're trying to bounce it and hit an enemy that's running away, it's going to effectively have 1450 range because you can throw it 725 on your ally. Then it's going to bounce an additional 725. And then in theory, it could bounce an additional 725. So, you know, you could get this to bounce really far in some team fights. So it does open up some interesting range possibilities that allows her to interact at a much further range than some of the other champions out there. So that's number one why she's really high up the list, is that she has the best sort of solo do-it-yourself trading pattern of a support. She's flexible because she can go defensive if she has to. She also has a lot of abilities that control movement speed, which is really good in a meta that is becoming increasingly defined by divers. So champions like Olaf are still strong. Hecarim is starting to see a bit more play. You have champions that want to run people down, like Kaisa. This movement speed is always going to be good. I mean, even on Assassins, it's pretty decent being able to speed them up, get them to run in there. On someone like Kha'Zix who wants to stick to people, it's good. So you've got a lot of scattered fights now where people are running around, either trying to run away from people or trying to chase people down in this meta. And that usually goes on in solo queue a lot, but particularly right now because team fighting is not as heavily emphasized. It's okay, but a lot of the team fighting mid laners and top laners and junglers just aren't as strong right now because a lot of those champions are tanks. And tanks have been nerfed a lot. So you're seeing a lot more assassins. You're seeing a lot more skirmishing in pretty much every role. And that's where movement speed becomes even more valuable. And Nami is one of the best at movement speed enhancement because each one of her abilities gives an extra 60 and then 20% AP. Or at least, yeah, all of them do that as a passive. And then her E allows you to stick to people for a slow for up to 3 seconds, really, if you auto attack once per second. And then, of course, her tidal wave does slow down the enemy as well. And don't forget, this speeds up allies by a lot. People forget that text line here, that it's double movement speed if your allies get hit by tidal wave. So this is a really good follow-up ability. When all of your allies are running in towards somebody, you just speed them all up, hit the enemy with the wave, it slows them down. It's really powerful. Everybody gets an extra 120 movement speed with a 0.4 ratio. So that's pretty good. And her damage is respectable, but not amazing. She has really good AP scaling, too. Because not only is this basically somewhere between a 1.1 to a 1.3 ratio, depending on how you chain these bounces together, but the more AP that she has, the less of a penalty you get per bounce. So that's an additional, basically, 7.5% scaling on that. And it's even more than that because it's multiplicative. So, and I've talked about this in the Nami guide before. You know, let's say that you're just trying to do a heal, damage, heal rotation in sort of a mid-game team fight where you have 3 ranks in W. Okay, so typically this would be 125 for the first heal, and then it is 150 times 0.85. So you get 128 just for easy math, and then you have the 128 bouncing back over here for a 125 again, but now this 125 is going to be reduced by an additional 0.85 per bounce. I'm trying to think of how that stacks up. So this gets reduced by 0.85, and then this gets reduced by an additional 0.85. Okay, so then you'd get the 125. So you'd only get 106 on the second bounce. Whereas if you had 200 ability power, then you would still get the full 125 here. You'd get the full 150 here, and then the 125 when it bounces back also. So, you know, that's not saying you should go like death cap on Nami or something like that, but that is saying that she does scale really well with AP if you want to get something like an Ardent Censer or a Shirelia's or a Twin Shadows or something like that. So, overall, she has good scaling with her W. She has really good sort of movement control. She has a good potentially multi-target CC off of her Aqua Prison, which is great if you're following up CC with somebody else. So, if your team has like a Varus or someone lands in a Nivea stun, or Vi, if people are playing Vi and they, you know, Vi ult somebody, this is really good follow-up CC because it's a 1.5 second stun, so that's good. Now, the one thing that she doesn't have, which we'll talk about with Nami here in a second, she doesn't, or Janna here in a second, she doesn't have a steroid for your AD carry in this kit, so there's nothing that scales off of your AD carry stats like there is for Lulu and Janna. So really late game, she potentially can get outscaled if your AD carries are just sitting there auto-attacking each other by someone like a Janna or by someone like a Lulu. But she still is going to operate a lot better with divers than either one of those champions. And she does have a heal. This heal is really nice. Once you get like a redemption and mana is not an issue anymore, you can use this for sieges as well, which is pretty good. I mean, 185 isn't like an earth-shattering heal, but remember that champions like Lulu, Janna, and Karma have all had their shields nerfed over time, so now they're 210 shields for the most part. Karma's is 190, and then Janna's and Lulu's are both 210. So this 185 used to not be as good last season, you know, when compared to like the 240 shield off of Lua and Janna, but because those have been nerfed, then this gets a lot better by comparison. And remember, this bounces, right? So you can get a double heal bounce. So that 185, if you heal somebody first and then it bounces to an enemy and then it bounces back to an ally, you're effectively getting almost a double heal there. So you're getting 185 times, if you have 0 AP, times 0.85 plus... So in a team fight, you're actually healing for closer to 342, which is a lot, especially considering it's going to have a 0.6 ratio added onto that. And if you have any kind of AP, then it's going to reduce the deduction on there as well. So that's actually quite a lot of healing in a team fight. So she's good in team fights because of that, but she's also really good at skirmishing because of the movement changes. Okay, so let's look at, and I have recommended runes and items for all of the top champions as well, if you click on the little mini Google Doc for each larger Google Doc consideration. So I think that the main one that you're probably going to want to go, you can go Airy, Mana Flow Band, Celerity, Scorch. That's going to be standard on most enchanters that can apply early game pressure. If you think you're just going to get completely run out, and you're not going to be able to fight in lane, so let's say you're against like a Draven, Leona, and you have an Ezreal as your AD carry, then you might consider taking Gathering Storm instead of Scorch, because you're not going to be able to apply enough pressure early in that lane. So Scorch is really there if you're able to use that W on cooldown and constantly chain together auto attacks and harass people. If you're in a heavily losing lane, though, then Gathering Storm is going to be better just to scale up for that mid to late game. The Mana Flow Ban helps her out a lot as well, because she kind of is a mana hog early, and this was a huge buff to overall mana generation. I know some people were confused. They thought it was a nerf. I talked about that in my last patch notes video. It's actually a really big buff, so go back and watch that if you haven't. You can just skip down to the Mana Flow section. It's time-stamped if you want to see all the math behind that, but it's a really big nerf, or a really big buff, rather, when people thought it was a nerf, or some people thought it was a nerf. And then sort of your greedy build, you can go Footwear, Cosmic Insight, which can be decent. This is going to be a really good value. Cosmic is really good on her because she uses her abilities on cooldown. She has 3 different abilities that she might want to use in a fight. And having the item active CDR is pretty good because she's almost always going to get at least 1 item active, if not multiple item actives, whether that's, you know, Redemption, Mikhail's. Those are the 2 most common ones. An Ardent Sensor is usually what you get on her, but that might even become relevant if you have to get something like a Banner of Command or a Zeke's Harbinger because they have a really fed 80 carry, or a Kha'Zix or something like that. You need a 60 armor item. And don't forget that that 5% cooldown also affects your Sweeper, so any sort of item active cooldown reduction also affects Sweeper, which gives you a little bit better vision control. So the CDR is good, and then the Summoner cooldown is very good too. I mean, she likes Flash, she's squishy, helps her get out of situations, and then anytime you have more ignites, that's good. So she really can make good use of Cosmic Insight. And then Footwear, you don't need to buy early boots with her, unlike Zyra that I described earlier. You know, it's not a huge power spike when you complete your boots. It's nice. Usually you want to get mobility boots on her to help you rotate around. But, you know, it's not as necessary, especially if you're still in lane at that time. Mobility boots really start to shine once the first couple of towers go down. So, in other words, there's no rush on the boots. They're good, but you can afford to wait on them if you want to. You can also go kind of a more measured build if you want, you know, some early game power, but you also want biscuits. You're afraid it's going to be a pretty heavy attrition lane. You're against a Sona, a Karma, a Lulu, something like that, where you're going to be taking a lot of hits back. You can go something like Biscuits Cosmic Insight as well, which is really popular because you can make good use of the extra mana and the extra HP that you get off of that. So, you know, a moderated version of this would be Biscuits Cosmic. If it's about an even lane, it's going to have a lot of trading in it. Another option is you can go down here, and this is if you're against an all-in lane, so if you're against an Alistar or a Leona, you really need to go for this. The Bone Plating helps protect you early. You do get a little bit of extra HP early off of going into the Resolve Tree. It's not as much as you used to get, but it's still pretty legit. And then Chrysalis, that extra 60 HP early is a really big deal, and it does transition to AP for the mid to late game so that you're going to be a bit more relevant. So that's decent. Another build that I didn't put here that's like okay is the Ingenious Hunter build. if you know that you're going to get an early redemption in a Mikhail's, and your lane's not going to be too difficult, then you can go for something like Taste of Blood plus Ingenious Hunter. Taste of Blood's actually going to give you more HP back than you would get off of Biscuits. So the health sustain's going to be just as good or better than you would get with Biscuits. You don't get the mana back, but with if you're going for an Ingenious Hunter build, you're going to have a lot of Fairy Charms early because you're probably going to be going Redemption and Mikhail's Rush. So, you know, mana is not going to be an issue after your first couple of backs, and it's probably even after your first back, mana is not going to be as much of an issue. So Biscuits aren't going to matter as much. But the reason you would go Ingenious is if you want to go Mikhail's Redemption, because both of those are actives. They're both very powerful. And the reason that you would want to go early Mikhail's Redemption is if you're against very heavy CC. So if you pick that Nami and the enemy team has something like a Lysandra, they have something like a Vi, an Ashe, Varus, Thresh, a lot of champions, Sejuani. A lot of champions have very heavy CC. Sometimes it's a very good idea to get an early Mikhail's, Veigar, to help get people out of, you know, tough situations. And if you're getting Mikhail's, then you almost always want to get Redemption early on because that 20% plus healing and shielding off of Mikhail's scales insanely well with Redemption. Because with Redemption, you get 3 times the healing power on that active. So that's a pretty good, respectable build, especially if you don't think you're going to need Ardent Sensor on your AD carry early. So if, you know, you have something like a Jen who's not particularly great with Ardent Sensor, or Ezreal or Misfortune, someone who's not going for a lot of attack speed early on, then that can be pretty good. Or even something like Xayah, who's going to end up getting 2 heavy AD items, or even Draven, who's going to get like heavy AD. They're going to go something, you know, in the case of Xayah, like Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge, or something like that. So they're only going to get 1 Zeal item in their first 3 items. Then maybe you don't need Ardent Sensor as much. And you have an option too, you know, if you're not sure if they have a lot of CC, if they have like an Ashe Thresh lane, and you have like a Kai'Sa on your team, you can still just kind of feel the game out. If your Kai'Sa's getting ahead, you can get a Forbidden Idol early and then switch over to Ardent Sensor if you don't think you need the Mikhail's early. Then you can switch and get it later on. You can get the Mikhail's Redemption as your second and third item. So you have a bit of flexibility, but having the 40% cooldown from Ingenious Hunter is massively strong if your first couple of items are going to be active. So if you're not getting Ardent Sensor first, then it can be a really strong option. Okay. So, you know, items you want to get: Mobility Boots, Watcher most of the time. If you're going to be in a heavily losing lane, you can get Coin, but Watcher's really good. Usually she can take good advantage of that. You can go Redemption, Ardent Sensor, Mikhail's are kind of your core 3 items. Shurelya's is another one you can consider if you want to help your team engage a bit more. You can also go Twin Shadows if you want to try to land your bubble a bit more. If you feel like you need to try to be an initiator, which is really not where you want to be as Nami, but if you feel like you need that option, you can go something like Twin Shadows. Or if people are just like bush baiting you a lot, if they're just hanging out in bushes and you're having a hard time controlling vision, Twin Shadows can help a lot. And this becomes a lot more attractive if you're going to go for the Taste of Blood Ingenious Hunter build, because obviously the cooldown's going to be a lot lower there. Okay, so that's Nami. How we look on time, we're spending way more time than I would like, but I always spend a lot of time on the first few picks. But I would like to try to get this done in an hour or so. That's why Nami's really hot. I've described Janna a lot, why she's really strong, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here. Anyone that's watched the channel for any length of time is going to understand that Janna's really strong right now. Now, something that a lot of people probably missed in the patch notes, and I've talked about this before, and I'll go ahead and pull this up here really quickly. There was a massive, massive nerf to Janna's W that no one mentioned, at least statistically. That's what it says in the patch notes, and that's what it says on the League Wikia as well. So let me pull up some evidence here to show you what I'm talking about. So I think I've got it paused at the right place.
Sour Patch Kids Tropical have arrived.
Okay. Here. Okay. So let's look at the patch notes really quickly here. Do I have them still pulled up? Yes. Okay. So if we look at Janna, and I talked about this last night on stream, it looks pretty innocuous, right? You're like, oh, it's only 5 less damage. Look at that. No big deal, right? That's also what the League Wikia says if you look at the history of League Wikia. This is a grand conspiracy by Rito. No, but this is serious, and for some reason nobody notices, even though Janna is like one of the most popular supports. I watched Scar's video, I watched LS's video on patch notes. You know, I like to watch a lot of different content so that, you know, I get different perspectives and so I can bring you some of the freshest stuff. I don't agree with everything that Scar and LS say, but they do have good ideas and I do try to learn from them. But here, you know, they're pretending like this ability only did 240 top-end damage. They're saying it's reduced by 5. That is false. This ability did 280 damage. Okay? So look here. These were my in-depth support tier list from 8.7, and because I always look at the Wikia there for the top 5 champions at least, then we get to see sort of all of the stats. If you zoom in, and this is as much HD as I can get here, right? This is 1080, but it's probably going to look a little bit blurry, and I can't zoom in anymore. But look right here. Let me fast forward this a little bit. Just so we scroll down. You don't need to scroll down that much, though. Look at this. 280 right there. You guys see that? This is 225. This is 170. This is 115. This is 60. So sorry if you're like squinting at your phone or something. Just trust me, that's what these numbers are. And that's what they have been for a very long time on Janna. They haven't nerfed her W damage ever. In all of these iterations of Janna, as much as they've changed her, you know, in the preseason, they never nerfed the damage. They always changed the movement speed stuff and her range. And like how much it slowed, but they never changed the damage. So on patch 8.7, this reads 280, 225, 170, 115, 60. Let's see what they say in the patch notes. 240, 195, 150, 105, 60. That is false. That is not what her numbers are. They're lying to you. That's not what her numbers are. So this nerf down to 235, if that's what this number actually is, I haven't tested it like in the live game. I didn't play Janna last night. My one night on this patch so far. But if this is accurate, this is a nerf of 45 damage at the top end. That is a lot of damage reduction. So if we look at, you know, 45 divided by 280, that's a reduction of 16%. That's a lot. So that's not minus 5. That's minus 45 if you max out your W, which I don't advocate. But even looking at this, going from 170 to 145, that's still 25 off of 170. Which is still like 14.7%. So this is not just 5 damage off. This is 25 damage off on her level 3 W, which is what you should be getting in most lanes. So that's a pretty significant nerf. That's a lot of damage off. Especially with you think about how much you spam this in lane a lot of times. As Janna, pretty much every time it's off cooldown, you should be walking up trying to hit them with a W and an auto attack. That's a lot. Now, the 5 movement speed is not going to be as massive of a deal because once you level up your W and with all your runes and all that stuff, you're going to have, like, you know, 375 move speed at level 1. So this is definitely worth it. So I still think that Janna's really good. She's still number 2 on my tier list, but this is definitely a significant nerf to her early game that nobody's talked about, that's not disclosed in the patch notes accurately, and that's not disclosed on the Wikia accurately. I'm the only one, the only content creator, I think, that's noticed this and pointed this out so far. And part of that's because I'm a support specialist and I've played a lot of Janna back in my day. So I'm going to notice numbers like that when they look off. And I do a lot of analyses for the channel. So I work with these numbers a lot when I explain things to people. Because everyone always, especially with Janna, because everyone's always like, you have to play a strong AP support. There's no way you can win with an enchanter. You can't play something like Janna in silver. There's no way you can win. When Janna is almost always the highest win rate champion, or at least in the top 5 for, you know, bronze, silver, gold, platinum. Most of the time, she's always in the top 5. Yeah, she's the number 2 win rate, right? She's the overall highest win rate. She's at 54%. So anyone that tells you you have to play a strong AP champion to win is lying. You can, and AP champions are good in bronze, silver, gold especially. They are really good, and you can win with them. But you can also win with Janna. And the reason that AP supports look a lot stronger and why a lot of high-end players, like challenger-level players who do patch notes, or tier list and stuff like that are going to tell you to play AP champions is because they would win a lot with AP champions in bronze because they're going to notice mispositioning. They're going to abuse people really hard playing something like Brand and Zyra, just like I would. You drop me into a bronze game, yeah, and I was trying to get the highest win percentage I could to support, yeah, I would play Zyra every game because I'm from a much higher elo, right? I'm going to be able to take advantage of mispositionings of people. I'm going to get the right items. I'm going to leverage advantages, you know, but like normal bronze people who are playing as other bronze people aren't going to play Zyra as well as I play Zyra, or as well as, you know, another diamond, platinum, challenger level player is going to play Zyra. They're not going to be as aggressive a lot of times. They're not going to hit the skill shots as much, all that kind of stuff. So, yes, if you're smurfing, if you're a booster or something like that, yes, something like Brand, Zyra, those are going to be really good in bronze and silver. And they're still good, you know, if you're just a normal person in bronze or just a normal person in silver, they're still good. But they're not as much better than enchanters as people make them out to be. Okay, so they are still good, but you can definitely win with enchanters in bronze and silver because enchanters are just a lot more reliable and they scale a lot better, unless you get really far ahead with the AP supports. So anyways, circling back to Janna, you can win with her. She is good, even in bronze, even in silver. She's really strong. She's almost always has one of the highest win rates, and that will continue. So yes, her early game did get nerfed a lot, right? You're losing 25 damage on your tier 3 W, which means you're not going to be able to harass as much. But that's not why you play Janna historically anyway. She's never been an early game powerhouse. Maybe for like one patch in the preseason before they like nerfed her like 7 times after that patch. She was pretty scary early in the game when Aerie was a lot stronger before they nerfed Aerie and Scorch and everything else in the sorcery tree. But so yeah, she has a worse early game, but her shield is still amazing. It's still, you know, a very big shield. It still gives out a ton of extra AD. People forget about this. This is like giving your AD carry a free BF sword when you max out your shield. And it also has AP scaling on it. So if you have 100 AP, it's even more than a BF sword. That's really, really strong. She scales really well with plus healing and shielding and AP. She has a 0.7 on her shield. You know, AP gives her this. And then her ultimate not only displaces people, but it also heals for an insane amount. I mean, that's a 300 base heal at level 6 with a 150% AP ratio that also benefits from plus healing and shielding. So she's just really good. You can still put down some harassment early on with your Zephyr. It'll be less, significantly less than it was, but that's fine because you're not picking her to be an early game powerhouse. That's just something that you could just kind of do to pass the time while you scale up a little bit. Just throw some Zephyrs at people. So, you know, so is the nerf going to matter? Yes. That's why I dropped her 1 spot. But she's still really strong. Now, she does have some tough matchups potentially into early game harassment champions, like Nami, Lulu, Sona. You know, there are a lot of enchanters early on that can kind of push her around. But when it comes to the late game, she's one of the safest, especially into assassins, because she can reset the fight with her Monsoon. She can get people, she can disengage all those people that are trying to dive, heal your team up, and then she can shield through with her shield. And she can get away from people really easily because she has just a crazy amount of movement speed off of her W. So, she's still going to be super strong. She's still very good. You can still blind pick her if you want. She's decent. She's a very good pick into Morgana, who's becoming very popular because you can rush something like a Mikhail's to cleanse off the Morgana bind, and she already scales really well with plus healing and shielding, and you're just going to have a lot more power than Morg later on because your shield gives all this extra AD and protects against all types of damage, whereas Morgana's shield only protects against AP. It does stop crowd control, but you're just going to scale heavier than Morgana does in a lot of compositions. So she's pretty good in a Morgana, and she's pretty good against assassins for an enchanter. Yes, she can still get blown up as Zed a lot easier than someone like Alistar or Tahm Kench, but she's still going to be sort of a premier mid to late game enchanter support, and that's not going to change. She's still going to have a super high win rate even after the nerfs. Now, it's probably going to fall down like a percentage point or so. You know, maybe it goes down to 53%, but she's still very, very strong right now. So, you know, what I recommend on her is getting 3 points in W in a lot of lanes. If you're getting completely shattered in lane, you can just go ahead and max shield first, but usually getting 3 points in W for the laning phase, and then once you start transitioning into the mid game, then you want to get your shield maxed out after that. So 3 points in W early, 1 point in Q, and then max your shield after that. So you should get your shield maxed out by level 10. So you're delaying your total max on the shield by 1 level, and in exchange, you're getting a little bit of pressure with your W in lane, so that you can actually use your mana. If you max out shield, you're just not going to be able to use your mana that much in lane a lot of times. So you want to go the standard Airy Mana Flow Celerity. If you are able to land a bunch of W's in lane and harass, then you can go Scorch. If you're in a lane where you're not going to be able to put down a significant amount of harassment, then you can just go ahead and get Gathering Storm. And then, you can go Biscuit, Cosmic Insight, or you can go Footwear, Cosmic Insight. Just depends on what you need. Basically, the same thing that I talked about with Nami. The same situation applies. If they have an all-in champion, you can go Bone Plating and Chrysalis. If they don't, if you just want kind of a standard, okay, we're going to have some light harassment, you can go Biscuits Cosmic. Or if you want to be really greedy, you can go Footwear Cosmic, especially if you have a champion that's going to rush Ardent Sensor, or if you want to rush Ardent Sensor for that champion, if they are like a Kaisa or a Twitch or something like that who's going to get a lot of attack speed, a Varus, a Kog'Maw, and you want to rush Ardent, then going Cosmic Boots is sort of the greediest, strongest thing you can do if you don't think you're going to get harassed out early. And then kind of like last time too, if you think you're going to get an early Mikhail's, then you might want to go Taste of Blood and Genius Hunter. So if you're against Morgana, Ashe, Thresh, just a lot of other stuff, Fiddlesticks, a lot of other stuff with really hard CC, and you want that Mikhail's early to help cleanse your allies, then you're going to get a Redemption after Mikhail's typically, and then you're going to want Ingenious Hunter, because that's going to be really strong. Mobility Boots, kind of the standard for most people. It's the same thing as Nami. Now, I would say it's safer, or it's more effective to go coin on Janna more often than Nami, because you're not going to be able to put down as much harassment. There are going to be more lanes where you're just going to kind of have to concede the lane to an extent. Like, don't just AFK at your tower, but you're not going to be able to walk up and W and harass as much, because you're going to take bad trades if you do that. So if they have something like a Nami or a Lulu or a Soraka, you're not going to be able to go up and trade your W for whatever their trade is a lot of times. You can do it a little bit, but you're going to be on the losing end of that more often than Nami would be. So that means that you'd want to take coin more than Frostfang, because you're not going to be able to put down as much harassment. It's going to give you less gold generation, and it's going to take you longer to get your wards if you do that. So if you're against something like a Braum or a Tom or just something else that's going to kind of be a pushover in lane, then you can get Frostfang early. But if you're against a heavier harassment champion, if you're against like a Karma, Lulu, Nami, something like that, then you're probably better off taking coin, because you're most likely going to lose that lane. So Janna is kind of the definition of lose lane, win game, because she's so strong scaling in the mid to late game. So once again, you don't want to roll over and do nothing in lane. You want to look for opportunities, land your W's whenever you can, but you also want to be realistic and not just run out there and just go full out aggression no matter what in the matchup, like some people will tell you to do. Because if you're just going to take bad trades, you don't want to do it, right? If you're going out and trying to harass that Nami with your W, and then she's healing all of it back and chunking you for like a third of your health off of her W, then don't do that. So, you just kind of have to calibrate based on lane matchups. And I talk about a lot of these things in my tier list video, so be sure to check that out. I think I have a Season 8 tier list also. I don't remember if I've done a Season 8 Janna or not. It might just be Season 7 still. So maybe I'll eventually get around to a Season 8, but the play patterns are the same. Like, the items will be a bit different than what I talked about in Season 7, probably. Actually, probably not. I was probably still telling you to get Redemption, Ardent Sensor, and Mikhail's. But anyways, let's speed this up just a little bit here. I have to leave in, like, maybe 15 minutes or so we'll go ahead and pick it up a bit more, but those are the top two you should probably be playing right now. Morgana is someone who's risen up a little bit in popularity. The reason for this is Tahm Kench has fallen a lot in popularity, and Morgana's pretty good in a push lane. So historically, a problem with Morgana is she's not super reliable. She's okay. Her Q is pretty slow. If you land it, it's great. If you miss it, it's not that amazing. So she's not as reliable as some other champions. She has a really low auto attack range of only 450, so you can't trade autos that well with her. And her W is pretty worthless as the game goes on. But games are ending a lot faster now. You're not going to get much past level 13 or 14 in a lot of your games. typically. So it's not going to matter that Tormented Soil basically sucks because you're only going to get 1 point in it anyways. That's fine. With most enchanters, you're only going to get 1 point, one of their abilities. Now, early on, it can help you push waves in, which makes her a very good pairing with Caitlyn, which is what you see with her in professional play some. Because you can just kind of just push it into the tower. So she's kind of like a Karma with a little bit better protection now. So you just push early, and then once they're in their tower and there aren't a lot of minions in your way, you're going to have a cleaner shots at landing Dark Bindings. And if you land those Dark Bindings under tower, then you can make people miss CS. So even though early on maybe you're not going to do some blistering damage with Dark Bindings, it will disrupt people, make them miss CS, do a little bit of incidental damage. And also, if you miss your Dark Binding and they're under tower CSing, then they can't punish you for that. They can't run at you and immediately engage. If you're just sitting in the middle of a lane and you just throw a Dark Binding at somebody and you miss, then they're going to know, okay, she's not going to have a cooldown for 11 seconds. We can go all in. So if it's like a Thresh or a Leona or anybody, they can go up and just beat you down because they're going to know you don't have a key cooldown. But if you have them pushed under tower, they can't come out on top of you because if they try to do that, then they're going to miss a lot of the CS at their tower. And most people aren't going to want to make that trade. So it's basically free skill shots without retaliation or without as much of a chance of retaliation when you have them pushed under tower. And Tormented Soil allows you to do that. And then obviously the Black Shield is really good. So Tahm Kench is someone historically that I've preferred for this kind of function, the anti-CC support. So if they have something like, Ashe, Thresh, Varus, stuff like that, then, I prefer just to eat them with Tahm because it was retroactive just in case I was a little bit late on the shield or just in case they were really far out of position and I couldn't get close enough to shield or something like that. I could still walk up or flash W somebody and save them with Tahm Kench. But because Tahm has been nerfed so much, he's just borderline unviable right now, especially under challenger level play. Unless you're just really leveraging Tahm Kench's ultimate and really leveraging, your allies won't spit themselves out whenever you W them, which is asking a lot for people in gold and lower. Almost everybody's like, what happened to me? They don't even know what happens when Tahm Kench eats them. They freak out and they just press all the buttons on their keyboard and they spit themselves right back out and die. So now that Tahm Kench has been nerfed a lot in terms of his raw numbers and he has those structural problems that I just mentioned with his W and his ult and solo queue, then that makes Black Shield a lot more attractive right now. And especially because Locket is a lot worse. You're going to be seeing a lot more AP champions coming out of the woodworks. And this Black Shield is really strong against AP champions. And because they've nerfed Lulu and Janna's shield, this 350 base shield is really, really high if you level this up. The cooldown is a bit lower, or is a bit higher rather, than Janna, who has a 10-second shield, and Lulu has 10 seconds, and Karma's I think is 8 seconds, so it's 15. But it is very powerful, and it does stop crowd control. This is really, really good with assassins, too. So if you have a Katarina, a Fizz, a LeBlanc, any of those champions, this shield stopping people from crowd controlling assassins, or the Kha'Zix who jumps on their backline, if they can't crowd control these super heavy burst champions, it makes it almost impossible to deal with them. Because you're not going to do enough damage to kill, typically when Fizz lands that fish on you, you're not going to do enough damage to kill him before he kills you. A lot of time with an assassin. So your only hope is that you can crowd control him and then do enough damage to kill him. Or you can crowd control him and maybe escape. But that's not happening with Black Shield. So when you put the Black Shield on a super high damage burst priority champion on your team, it's particularly powerful. So the fact that we have assassins running around right now a lot makes Black Shield a lot more valuable. So she's just fitting into this early game push with Tormented Soil, challenge towers, then the mid game, try to support your assassins who are carrying the games increasingly more than 80 carries. 80 carries are still strong, they are still meaningful, but assassins are spiking at 1.5 items right now. And they're getting very, very strong and very powerful. I'd say a lot of games are becoming defined just as much by the assassin as they are by the 80 carry. So that makes the Black Shield super strong right now. And someone like a Janna shield, gives the extra AD to AD assassins, So a Talon and a Zed benefit a lot from that, but the shield doesn't do a lot for Fizz. It does prevent damage to him, which is nice, but he doesn't benefit that heavily from AD. Or LeBlanc doesn't benefit heavily from AD. So, that just makes Black Shield even more valuable. And Soul Shackles is also a pretty nice peeling tool. It's not instant, it's not going to protect as well as a Janna, ultimate, but it's still going to give you some pretty good peel potential. So It's okay, and it's on a pretty low cooldown of 120. Now, she also has the option of going something like an Hourglass if you want to. I don't like getting Hourglass a ton on Morgana. A lot of people, because of the interaction, think that you have to rush Hourglass every single time on her. But if you notice, like, top-end pro players, nobody has Hourglass. Like, one guy has Hourglass, okay? So that's a myth out there. I get that comment every single time I play Morgana. People are just like, what are you doing, you idiot? Why don't you rush Hourglass? Because you don't do that as support, right? You can do that as a mid laner, but you want utility items. You want items that are going to help your team. Hourglass is a very greedy item. You don't always have to flash in and ult with Morgana and then Hourglass just because you can. Like, yeah, is it a fun interaction? Sure, it's great. But you're at the end of the day, you're still paying 2,700 gold for something that doesn't benefit your allies at all, hardly. It's strictly a greed item that makes you a bit tankier and gives you AP, and it's just not as good on a support Morgana. It's just not where you want to be. Okay? So yes, in some situations, can you get Hourglass? Sure. And it is a good option. If you are against something like a Zed or a Talon, she does have that option where a lot of other supports don't, where she can get an armor item that gives you really good armor that also synergizes very well with her kit. She doesn't have to get something like a Banner of Command or a Zeke's like you might have to begrudgingly buy as Janna if they have a 6-0 Zed, right? Just so you don't die. So she has an option where she doesn't have to go as far out of her way to get extra armor as some other champions, enchanters, would have to go. So that's good, but you don't always have to buy Hourglass. So overall, yeah, she's positioned pretty well. Like, she doesn't have a great matchup against Janna, because Janna can outscale her, but she's still okay. I mean, a 3-second bind is not really going to go out of style. That's a ludicrously long amount of crowd control. So she kind of serves as pseudo-engage as well. So, you know, if you still want that enchanter, you still want the peeling, you still want to have the option of Black Shield, you still want to be able to get something that can benefit from, you know, good itemization, like, you know, being able to get redemptions or Shirelias, stuff like that, then Morgana's a good choice. And she has the potential, if you land that bind in the mid to the late game, a 3-second stun, somebody's going to die if you do that. So she's in a very, very good position right now. Now, in terms of, like, win percentage, you know, she's only at a 50% win percent overall. But she's very strong. And that's why she has risen up a lot right now, is because it's become more of an early game push meta. The game's becoming increasingly defined by AP assassins, which she's very good both with because of Black Shield and sort of against because Black Shield can kind of help. And she's a good response to people who are starting to go more of these hard engaged champions to counter enchanters. So you're starting to see more Alistars cropping up, Leonas, and stuff like that to try to counter the Jannas and the Lulus and the Namis that are sort of running around everywhere. And she's a good answer to that. And she's replacing Tahm Kench as sort of the anti-CC role. So yeah, I think Morgana is extremely good right now. You should definitely consider picking her up. The stars are definitely aligning for her. And the fact that you can go something like a Shirelia's or a Twin Shadows that you don't have to get Locket, which she really did not want to have to buy. That sort of liberates you to buy different items now. She doesn't have to get a Mikhail's either if you're using Black Shield appropriately, so that's another item that she doesn't have to buy. Like, you know, a Janna and a Nami might have to buy a Mikhail's against something like a Thresh, but she has her Black Shield, so she's not going to need it as much. Yeah, so there's that. So yeah, overall, Morgana really good. I still think that Nami and Janna are better blind picks, probably. But Morgana is very, very good with specific comps, and increasingly more popular champions. So great if you have Assassins on your team, great if you have Caitlyn, Jhin, or just something else that wants to push and pressure early. Great against crowd control. So good against most things, just kind of problematic against some of the enchanters. But I mean, you know, if Janna rushes a Mikhail's, that's going to take a lot of power away from Morgana's. That's going to take away her Q. So she's not going to have her engage, and she's going to get outscaled. So the fact that she has a pretty unfavorable matchup against Janna is going to pull her down a little bit because Janna is the most popular support that's really strong right now. But overall, pretty good. Zyra, for the reasons I described earlier, and I'm going to have to pick it up, so I've only got like 6 minutes here, and then we have to end this because I have to go out to campus. And so, sorry, I'm not going to get to spend a lot of time on the other people, but not a lot has changed down here. Zyra's still really strong for the reasons I described up here. AP supports are getting better because of Locket. You can actually rush something like a Twin Shadows, and it's not awful on Zyra if you want to. You can go for Eyeball plus Ingenious Hunter for the reasons I described up here. With her, it's kind of goofy. You're not going to see a lot of pros building that, but I think because she wants her boots early, she wants to get those Sorcerer boots, then you don't want magical footwear a lot of times, and she doesn't really need the mana off of Biscuits, so Inspiration is not really as great of a secondary tree anymore as it used to be. You can still go Resolve, but you're sacrificing a lot of AP, and Resolve as a secondary is not as good unless you're against an all-in lane, you're scared of like Leona or something like that. You can still go Resolve for Bone Plating and Chrysalis, but it's not amazing on her. Most people are just going to go, most pros who play Zyra are probably going to go Inspiration, and they're going to go, you know, like probably Cosmic Insight Biscuits if I had to guess. Oh, people are starting to get domination. They're going Zombie Ward Ravenous Hunter, though. I mean, this does give you some sustain, but I would much rather have Ingenious so that I have more sweepers and so that I have the options of going something like Ghosts early on. And not a lot of people are getting Ghosts. Just watch my tier list from last time. I described this a lot with Zyra. So watch the Zyra section on the last section's tier list. I don't have time to rehash all of that. But basically, the power curve is a lot smoother now. You have an option to have a more smooth curve, especially if you're not really running ahead, if you go something like a Twin Shadows earlier. Rushing the Leandries does give you more power once you complete it, but getting up to that point sucks for about 15 minutes, so it just depends on how the game state is going. But watch the video last time. I'd explain it in really good depth about Zyra and sort of these new itemization paths that I think could be pretty good. Okay, Soraka is going to be pretty strong now. She historically has problems against Assassins, which is not great because Assassins are becoming very popular, but she does have very favorable matchups against Nami and Janna in lane, so if the mid laner doesn't have an Assassin who's respectable, you know, if they're going something like Orianna, Ahri, or if they're still going like maybe a Talia or something like that, a poke type of champion, a Xerath, then Soraka can be really good. So just make sure that you're not going to get murdered by Kha'Zix, you're not going to get murdered by LeBlanc or Fizz. And Soraka is actually pretty strong. She's better in a tank meta because of the way that resistances work with healing, but overall she's still pretty strong right now. You just go the standard Airy down to Scorch or Gathering Storm depending on the matchup, and then you can either go Cosmic Insight, plus something else, either Boots or Biscuits, or you can go for the Resolve tree. If you pick Soraka early and then they pick a Leona into you, you can go Chrysalis, Bone Plating. That's going to be a tough matchup, but that'll certainly help out a little bit. And then if you want the anti-crowd control, you want to get Mikhail's and Redemption early, which are extremely good on her, plus healing and shielding is amazing. Then you can go for the Ingenious Hunter, blanking out, Taste of Blood build, or instead of Taste of Blood, since she already has so much healing, you could even go something like you know, Zombie Ward, or maybe even Eyeball Collection on her, because she does scale pretty well with AP as well. So I think she's pretty good. So she's a great counter to other popular enchanters right now. She's also pretty good into Morgana because she can rush Mikhail's and because she's going to outscale her. So Nami, Janna, Morg, Soraka is great against those, but she has a hard time against Assassins. So if you want to pick her, I would pick her up 4th or 5th pick and make sure you have really good visibility, especially of their jungle and especially of their mid laner, because those are going to be the people that are potentially going to roam down and camp you if you play Soraka. So you want to make sure that that's not going to be too brutal. Tier 2, we're going to have to blitz through this one super fast. So we're not going to have a ton of time up for it, unfortunately, but it's pretty much going to be the same as what I talked about last patch notes, so just go back and review that. But Rakan, pretty good engage, also doubles as an enchanter, doesn't have the same kind of problems as a lot of other engaged champions who are mostly tanks, so he can go for something like an early Ardent Sensor, Redemption. You could even get Mikhail's if you want to. He also has the option of going Shirelia's, which is really strong if you want the extra speed and engage. And he can even go something like Zeke's, which is becoming increasingly popular on him, to give him that little bit of tankiness, and because he has such a low cooldown ultimate, you can potentially even go like Ardent Sensor and Zeke's on him, which is what a lot of people are doing for that double on-hit buff. So if you have something like a Kai'Sa on your team who's going to get Rage Blade, or Varus, or Kog'Maw, or any of these other like heavy attack speed users, then Ardent Sensor plus Zeke's is a really good double buff on your AD carry, and he's one of the only people that can comfortably get both of those items and utilize them well. So if you have a really strong AD carry that you can trust that's going to be stacking a lot of attack speed, then Rakan can be very good as an engage option. So people are kind of getting a lot of different stuff here. Like I said, you are seeing Zeke's, you are seeing Shirelia's a lot. Ardent Sensor is potentially pretty good on him. So he has some of the most flexible build paths out there. I have an entire guide for Rakan for Season 8. If you go into the Google Doc and check it out. In terms of his itemization, I tried this last night. I think it works out pretty well. Just going kind of the Airy down to Scorch and then Chrysalis and you could go Revitalize on him as well. You can also go Bone Plating. But both of these are pretty good. You can still go the old Unsealed Spellbook if you want, but, you know, with the Airy, I think that Airy's probably a bit better than getting like 3 points in Q in lane. It's just such an early game meta right now that I feel like you have to be able to do something early game to keep up, or you're just going to get run out of lane. So he's still pretty terrible in the early game, but getting 3 points in Q and then taking Airy does give you a little bit of pushing, does give you a little bit of punch to fight back, and it's going to give you more healing. I wouldn't go full out max Q on him, but I think 3 points in lane will help heal you up and do some incremental damage. So he's still going to get probably run over by someone like a Nami, Soraka, Lulu, a lot of champs in lane, but once you get to that level 6, you have really strong engage, so he's pretty good. Lulu I dropped down a little bit because her ranges are so short and it's so dangerous right now to go against something like a Caitlyn or a Jhin when you have to get within 650 range to do your abilities. So she does scale very well into the late game with a Kog'Maw, Kai'Sa, those types of champions. She is, in theory, pretty good against assassins when you start thinking about her ultimate and her Whimsy, her W. So she's pretty good. She just has much shorter ranges, and she doesn't have a heal in lane, so she has bad matchups against Nami. She kind of goes even with Janna. You can pressure Janna early, but Janna typically outscales you later. She really doesn't want to, she doesn't scale very well with plus healing and shielding, so you can get Mikhail's on her, but it's not amazing because only her E benefits from that, her ult doesn't. So she kind of has some itemization problems against champions like Morgana or other heavy CC comps, like a Leona, Thresh, stuff like that. It's like you can go for, oh hi. You can't, I'm just about done here. You can go for Mikhail's, but it's just not as good on her as it is on someone like Janna. So Lulu's alright. You know, she's she's doing pretty well in terms of like, you know, 50% win rate, but I would probably rather just take Nami, Janna, or Morg at this point, but she's still pretty good, pretty respectable. And finally, the last person I want to talk about, then I have to get out of here, is Karma. I think she's rising in stock a lot right now for the same reason that Morgana is. Early push champions with early pressure are good. Karma's more of a teamfight-oriented champion because you can mantra E and give your team, you know, the entire team an Ardent Sensor buff, give them all a little bit of extra shielding. She can manipulate speed, kind of like Nami does, where you can get people to run around and chase people and run away from people really quickly. So she's kind of like a hybrid between Nami and Morgana right now. She's a lot worse against assassins, I think, than Morgana is, especially AP assassins. She doesn't offer very much crowd control, which kind of sucks. Like, all you have is your W for your delayed route. It's okay, but really you're picking her early game, especially with like Jhin or Caitlyn, just to push in the lane, harass people, go up like 20 CS, and then in the mid game push that advantage, and then just run around the map. You know, put a lot of macro pressure on people, and then have some pretty good team fight pressure if you get like Ardent Sensor and Redemption. So Karma's okay. You're mostly picking her for early game dominance. She's all right. She just doesn't scale as well as Janna or Soraka or Lulu, but she has similar early game pressure. I think that Nami has a favorable matchup against her early on, so that's kind of an issue. But Karma doesn't have to fight Nami. You can just push her in the tower and just never fight her. So, you know, you can deal with that. It's not as big of a problem. Nami isn't as other champions who don't have as much pushing power like Janna. Right, they're going to have to sit there and fight that Nami a lot in lane because Janna can't push very well, so that's an issue. But Karma being able to push Nami in means that you don't really have to fight her. Okay, and then the tanks are still, they're like the hard engaged tanks are still pretty good. They're still pretty represented. You look at like your Alistar, your Blitzcrank, your Thresh, your Leona. All of these are very good because they can start fights with enchanters, kill them, and then just start snowballing the game. So yeah, their items suck, you know, compared to enchanters, right? They, you know, they can't, you can get Locket, but it's a lot worse. You know, all the Resolve Tree has been nerfed, Unsealed Spellbook, and all of that has been nerfed. So yes, their items are worse than enchanters. Yes, their runes are worse than enchanters. But you know what? That doesn't matter if you just run in and blow people up and just snowball the game. So if you just grab Mobility Boots as Alistar and just run around the map and pick people off and close the game out at 25 minutes, It's not really going to matter which runes or items you have. So as long as you got your mobility boots, you're good to go. And a lot of these champions can also get Righteous Glory as a substitute for something like a Locket. It does cost more gold, but it does reinforce this idea of running around, roaming, making plays, and trying to close out the game quickly. So they do have the Righteous Glory option on all 4 of these. So these are all respectable. I just don't think they're tier 1 because it's really iffy. If you aren't successful on your roams, if your team falls behind, it's really hard to get back into the game. Whereas with someone like, Janna, Morgana, those type of champions, if they fall behind, they can still outscale some of these other champions if they hold on later into the game. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for this video. I did move down Brand a little bit as well. He doesn't feel as good. He's just a lot more conditional than Zyra. I would just want Zyra in every conceivable situation, just about, instead of Brand. Tom and Braum are still down here in tier 3. They're okay. They're going to be playable in Challenger and Pro level play. They're still all right. You can make them work in certain team comps, but they're a lot riskier. Malphite's not as good as I thought he might be. I was kind of shaky on that last patch. I was talking about the possibilities, but he just gets run over in lane too much. He's still interesting. Nautilus did get some buffs. I've been asked about him. He still just doesn't have enough. His mana costs are too high. His wave clear is just not good enough, and he's still kind of squishy for a tank. It just has the same kind of problems as other tanks. I would just rather, if you want to play Nautilus, I'd rather play something like Alistar, Blitz, Thresh, or Leona. But Nautilus is okay. Fiddlesticks is still like all right. I have seen some decent fiddles, but I moved Veigar up a little bit. He does have really nice stuns in team fights. He can pressure a little bit early on with his Q. Most of the time, I'd rather just play Zyra, but if you want those stuns for the team fights, he does have some pretty favorable matchups if you're against an immobile team. So, yeah, that's going to be it for this patch notes. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So, yeah, if you're, I highly recommend you play one of these 5 champions, although I do think that Karma is definitely a rising star. I think that Rakan is still one of the best engaged champions, and you can still play the hard engaged tanks if you're confident. You can roam a lot, make plays, and close out the games early. They can certainly be viable. But that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.